2026 is off to a great start, and it's almost time. With many exciting predictions and the recent emphasis on a potential major planetary event occurring in April, it promises to be a super transformational month. And we couldn't be more excited to be in Hawaii during this shift to integrate new frequencies. Folks, this will be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. April the 20th through the 24th, 2026. Join us in Kona, Hawaii for Journey to Truth's very first vacation conference retreat. Enjoy 9 presenters over 5 days with ocean adventures with dolphins and whales and sacred sites and so much more. Experience Hawaii like never before. You will enjoy 5 days on the Big Island, so don't wait. Start planning your trip today at journeytotruth.online. That's journeytotruth.online.
That's no moon. It's a space station.
Real now. Hey guys, welcome back to the show. A few things before we get started. There are still a few tickets available for our Hawaii conference coming up in April 20th through the 24th. There's 14 spots left, I think, technically. So secure your spot today. Start planning your trip. It's going to be a lot of fun. We can't wait to see you there. JourneyToTruth.online has all that information. And we do have virtual passes available now for $55 for all of you who can't make it in person. That information is on the website. So go and check that out. And if you are interested in watching our new Secret Space Program documentary, you can find it on our Patreon for $14.99. You don't have to be a member to watch it. You can just purchase it as a solo product. We appreciate all of the kind words and the support and the amazing feedback that we've gotten so far. And it's on its way to the streaming platforms now. We're in the quality control process. And then once we get through that, it should be distributed out into places like Amazon Prime and other streaming platforms like that. So stay tuned for that. But if you don't want to wait, you can go to our Patreon. That link is below and you can watch it today. That out of the way, today we are joined by our good friend, Joaquin Escobar. He's a psychic healer and a Qigong teacher. He has a YouTube channel called Esoteric Wisdom where he talks about that stuff and many other things. We've known Joaquin for a couple of years now, and we've gone on many trips with him, Chaco Canyon, a lot of sacred sites, and Aaron went to Japan with him, and we've been a number of places and did some amazing grid work and made some amazing discoveries. Peru. So many things, and he's become a good friend, but he has a lot to offer. He's really well practiced in, I guess you could say, the art of Qigong, because it is like an art, and it is a very, very efficient energy healing modality, in my opinion. And I used to dabble in it a little bit, watch the
Remember
YouTube
when you
video.
were
Yeah.
when you were doing
I used to watch the YouTube videos and like try to do the poses, but I really didn't understand it properly until, talking to Joaquin, and it really is about, this breath work and this movement and stuff. So, but there's so many more things we want to get into today. And I'm actually going to read through the list of things he sent me because I think it'll get people excited. Freemasonry, Dark Taoism, Mandela effects, grid work, pocket dimensions, Orion Wars, Draco portals, false New Age dragons, the higher self and healing, higher self trades and healing, and a few other things. But I think if we have time, I'd like to at least touch on all of that. But welcome to the show, Joaquin. We're so happy to have you here. This has been a long time coming. And just for the audience who doesn't know, maybe you could kind of introduce yourself a little better.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me on. My name's Joaquin Escobar. I have a small YouTube channel where I just do like some interviews and stuff and have some Qigong videos. And I do psychic readings and psychic healings for people. So anyone who needs some sort of psychic healings, I do that and we can get into that. I also practice Qigong and love martial arts, love fitness, and kind of incorporated that into my Qigong, and kind of that's how I found that sort of practice. And it's been really life-changing and been an amazing just conduit for maintaining energy and keeping yourself spiritually just kind of shielded and protected. And Yeah, just a good, really good energy cultivation techniques and stuff like that. So I teach qigong and do psychic healings and go on a bunch of grid working trips with you guys and
Right.
do so.
So I guess, when I met you, we were on these trips and it was like we went to Shiprock and stuff and you were just like constantly doing this qigong and this energy work on these sites.
Yeah.
But I find it inspiring in the sense that, energy is everything, right? Right now, especially. And we don't have the luxury to misuse our energy because this is a spiritual war and there's people that are going to take advantage of the chinks in your armor and stuff. So, whenever you're constantly making sure that your field is clear and protected, I think that says a lot about your self awareness and how you'll be able to navigate these times right now because it could be very difficult. So, maybe explain to us the importance of what is qigong actually doing for you,
Yeah.
and then why should people be leaning into that?
Yeah. So for me, I had such a um, tumultuous kind of first experience in grid work or going to Sedona and kind of interacting with a bunch of, I guess you could call them 5D people, awake people. I was so heavily attacked, and I can get into those attacks later, but I was so heavily attacked and uh, just psychically mind warped from entities and stuff we'll go into. That's why I was so absurdly diligent and fanatic about the qigong and about doing the energy work because I had been hit so hard by these entities that I was just basically fed up, and it's gotten to the point where it's just like, I'm just gonna do this 24/7 on, that one trip because it was such a kind of important grid work, and I didn't wanna mess it up, and I didn't wanna have any of those negative experiences again, and when you're in basically, like, the flow state or if you're in states of either, like, dancing, singing, states of bliss and movement also, you can, really deter any sort of psychic attack and also be ready for anything that sort of realm is going to be throwing at you when you're in those like high stakes psychic situations while you're doing grid work.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's important because obviously, like I just said, but you never know. Like you go to these events or you find yourself in these situations, the next thing you know, you're getting psychically attacked. And if you don't really have any awareness of that, that's kind of how they get you, right? They
Mhm.
rely on the fact that you haven't really done your research or looked into this or even understand what's possible, understand things like Harry Potter or documentaries. There's a really these dark arts exist, and so qigong, I think, or any type of energy work is good to keep yourself aligned. So, like, I guess just explain to somebody who doesn't know what qigong is, like, what are you actually doing? Like, what are you generating?
So like I guess a very simplified version would just be its energy movement. And what if you imagine yourself as a bio battery, a metaphysical bio battery, you're essentially trying to charge your battery. And you have different energy centers. You have basically the more of the physical energy center or then the psychic energy center or you have your heart energy center. You have all these energy centers in your body. And what you're essentially trying to do is build up energy and just charge yourself. So then if you have like, a super long day in a 3D, even just in a 3D way, you have the energy to go through that day and not be um, just physically drained. Your chi, this life force energy that like prana chi, all these different types of things. You're trying to preserve that energy and keep it secure so that just that you have energy because everything is trying to basically uh, siphon off of you, if for like a lack of a better term. Everything there's an energy exchange with everything, right? Just by doing anything, there's going to be an energy exchange. If you're eating, you have to break down the food. So there's always energy being like, created and destroyed. And it's all just like this all just like energy is constantly moving. So you have to move with the energy. And I think Qigong is basically a way for your psyche, your higher self, your subconscious mind, your energy centers to go with that flow where instead you don't get stuck in patterns of holding. So it's very similar to yoga. It's essentially the Chinese equivalent to yoga. And I just resonate more with it just for the fact that it can be more physically demanding and it's more upper body based as opposed to where yoga's more lower body.
Right.
Way of
Yeah.
explaining it. Yeah.
It just broke up for a second, but I think you're back. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the reasons I got into it was because somebody was, you see these healers and stuff, but I had a lot of stuck energy, like blockages, and I felt like I needed to start getting energy moving through my body because otherwise there's like these pockets of this stuck energy that can actually manifest into physical ailments if you're not properly moving them. So that's why I started strictly to help my physical body, which is interesting because it led to so many other things. But like, do you see results as far as that goes with your?
Oh my god, absolutely. I would say that that's the main thing. I think that that's also a selling point where I don't perceive, rather, even if, okay, the only way this is like, if there's an acute injury where you take like a knife wound, or you drink bleach or something, but any other sort of illness is going to be spawned from, there's a 5D correlate to any sort of illness you're experiencing in the 3D. There isn't it's not a disconnected like realm. It's we're all multidimensional. So if you're healing your aura and your 5D body, if we could put it in those terms, it's going to have massive effects on your 3D your person and just physicality. Um, and just through my kind of athletics that I've done in martial arts, like running and stuff like that, it's a huge game changer because it's all about breath control, which is key. It's all about meditation, focusing in certain positions, and there's huge physical benefits. I would say just not getting tired is probably the most key element of it. Not having like fatigue in the sense that you get tired during out the day. Like you don't really have like this like slumping feeling that you could normally have. You just could, you know, do anything and then you'd still have energy left over. That's, I think, the main thing. You're not experiencing that like mental fatigue that people normally, I think, experience, where they don't feel like they have time to this and they just need to like, oh, I gotta relax, or I gotta do, like, there isn't any of that. You can just go and go and go and go infinitely. There's not really like this. Um, and it's not like a caffeine sort of like crack feeling where it's like you're buzzing, but it's a controlled just energy feeling where you have enough energy to basically keep going, and you can then relax at the end. But it's all
Mhm.
that. It's all what you wanna focus on. You could also focus your energy and do more. Qigong for psychic abilities. So there's all different types of where you wanna, give your energy to, but there's massive, physical benefits. I think all illness is really spawned from just your own, essentially karma and these different aspects and these different multidimensional things that are actually occurring, but then we experience it as like a tumor or something, or some sort of
Right.
disease. It's another. There's so many different metaphysical layers that are coming in and playing in a factor
A
into that.
and that's been proven with, so many people that do, whether it's a QHHT session or an energy healing session where they finally release the energy that's been trapped in their, like, energetic body that's been causing their illness, and then it immediately clears up.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, the energy is first and then that manifests physically. So you can't just look at the physical. That's just the symptom you're looking at. But of course, the world we grow up in, you know, is only focused on the physical and only focused on the symptoms. And then they give you drugs and things that make it worse and poison you, but it's like when you actually learn the root cause of things, you can actually heal it. And that's really the ultimate root cause of everything is energy, because everything is energy. Even what's perceived as physical is just energy. It's just vibrating at a different rate,
Mhm.
right? So it
Yeah.
seems physical, but it's not. It's just vibrating energy still. So and this is the most dense. So like when you go up the layers, like you said, we're all multidimensional. So we all have vessels that are higher layers of that of different bodies. Like you have the etheric body, the energetic body, the light body, and then at a soul level is the greatest, where it's not, completely, you're just like a field of energy basically, or however you want
Right.
to look at that. And then it's like, I think, like you said, certain things are karmic, certain things you signed up for to get in a certain experience in this life. And you're meant to go through certain things, I think, because of that. But then once the lesson's learned, then you don't need it anymore.
Mhm.
But when you hold on to something unnecessarily, like traumas from your childhood or wounds and traumas from your past, that you then hold that energy within you, once you finally heal that truly, a lot of people, their diseases are from that, or from the anger they're holding on to, or
Right.
different things. I remember Dolores Cannon used to talk about that. She said so many people's illnesses or cancers are from them holding this anger from their past that they've never let go of, from something that happened to them in the past. And then once they finally do, it goes away.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think Qigong just kind of helps move stuck energy.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, right.
Well, go ahead, Joaquin, if you're going to add
Oh
to
yeah.
that.
No, I will. Um. 100%. 100%. I think. I've had illnesses where, and also as a psychic, I can see into it too. And I've had illnesses, or anytime I've gotten sick with stuff, it's all a metaphysical uh, contract for, multidimensional, from either past lives or ancestral, or then what you're dealing with exactly like in childhood. And there's so many different factors that are coming in, and once the emotion around it, the is essentially healed, the contract is broken, and then it can go away. So that's
Y-
that's a key
Right.
fact.
Yeah, I think and it just, we'll end it on this. I think it's just a good practice to help make sure that you're not unconsciously getting stuck in these patterns, right?
Right.
And you kind of mentioned that earlier, but I think that's precisely what happens. Like we'll find ourselves on this hamster wheel, like, and we're experiencing stagnation in life where nothing's happening anymore. But that's because you're not properly addressing the energy and then not allowing it to move out. And quite literally, that's what they want. They want you stuck in that place. So it's just a defense against the dark arts, like Potter calls it. It's a good way to make sure that you're clear and aligned and laser focused and hyper aware of everything that's going on. And it's a great way to navigate these times. But you mentioned in your notes the Freemasonry, the dark Taoism, is that how I say that?
Yeah.
Yeah, what were you wanting to discuss surrounding that? Because that's interesting to me.
Yeah. I mean, this is a okay, so this is kind of the interesting. So with my experience with Qigong, so with Taoism, if we look at it as there's multiple layers to it, where we have like Qigong practice, and then we have if we have philosophical Taoism, but then we also have just basically Chinese shamanism. There's an element of this is that there are basically dark basically dark wizards who are practicing um dark shamanism essentially. And usually, people like to think that, oh, all the religion oh, but like the Eastern religions, they're so pure and stuff. There's still a shadow side, a very dark, shadow side to Taoism, where there's still tons of dark practices in there. And so then goes to the interesting story. So I was looking for different masters, and I was looking for different teachers, and there was one teacher who, has basically basically there are teachers who then they have, there's different books where you can do, and some of the books then, and I this is let me preface this too, where once I read some of these books, and I really didn't resonate with this teacher, because it was basically then you have to enter a sort of secret society sort of thing, where you have to enter sort of anything like a Freemasonry, or sort of it's the same sort of idea. You have to, or like a religion, you have to take like in Christianity, like you get baptized, all these things, you're taking a metaphysical contract with these groups, and they can be small or large. And I had a very negative experience, and I don't think I've really shared this with you guys, where I had a very negative experience with a qigong practitioner, where it started to feel very secret society like, where you have to pray to this altar, and you have to take like an oath, and there was this all, and I saw these metaphysical contracts. And then there's in their books, there's basically dark stuff in the books. There's stuff how to create zombies, there's stuff how to siphon chi from people, and there's all these basically dark practices. And I think this has been going on for a very long time, and I think it was very intentional. All the stuff you see in basically, it's another hand of the essentially dark cabal system where, normally we look at it like, okay, there's the Freemasonry or there's like the elites or there's all these things. You know, Unfortunately, China's pure Qigong system, so many of those people have been killed off who know Qigong, like Tibet's been conquered and part of China now. So it's like it's still under this control. So I think unfortunately the really good practitioners basically all fled and they have other teachings there. But I tried seeking out Taoism, and then it seems basically evil. It seems basically about a bunch of dark practices about, sacrificing chickens and stuff like that, and altar stuff. So it seems very paradoxical to philosophical Taoism that we see. There is a dark shamanism side that I tried, seeking out different teachers and stuff. And then that is something that I did run into, um, seeking different Qigong teachers. Cause, there's tons of Qigong teachers we can get into where they can move objects or, do very wizard like true force things where they can make people literally like what Obi-Wan does, where he like makes people forget that they talk to them. There's supposed qigong teachers who can like phase through objects, move objects, set objects on fire. So there's tons of different examples of this.
Levitate.
Levitate, right? So there's tons of different stuff, and that was in the books too. But then there's also what was in the books. Just there was elements of dark stuff. So there are just paradoxically with the philosophical Taoism and how Zen it is. There are practices because also, and just for the information, because when you make these sort of contract sort of things, and there are dark stuff. Because I can also show you these books too. I have them actually right over here. I kept them because they're like a couple $100. They basically there's metaphysical contracts that there's other. They're just basically portals to other things that are dark. So you shouldn't even have those things. And it was unfortunate that it's just to basically I have them to bring awareness now because it's very important if you're going to practice qigong. If someone's basically saying that they're um, just be very careful, very trust your own intuition. And if there's stuff that I don't resonate at all with cutting off chicken heads and all this shit. So I just want to do qigong and on the pursuit to enlightenment. So I think it's very important for people to be wary of certain things that on the surface, like seem
Innocent.
innocent, right? Yeah, Zen, innocent. But then turns out that no, it's connected to tons of dark portals, tons of dark things, and it's just to bring awareness to people, for people to be very aware of the qigong practitioners they're training with, and understand kind of that element of it, because there are basically people who, even if they're not practicing it, they're still, and I can get into how all of that's connected, but it's it's still metaphysically connected to the dark, even if you have that sort of thing. If you're metaphysically contracted to those things, you are. Um, it gets very complex, and I can get into kind of the esoteric, big world picture of how that's, um, of how it's very hard to explain in a 3D way.
You can end up tying yourself to that on
You're tying yourself to that, and you joining any sort of secret
Right.
society, Freemasonry, any sort of
Right.
thing like that. It's
Even if you join Freemasonry because you're like, oh well, the basic knowledge is it's just a cult. It's powerful. It can be used for good or bad, which is true. But if you join it in a way, you're tying yourself to that, like the
exactly.
karma of that, and that's not good. Yeah.
Thank you, and yeah, they're basically taking trades from you and stealing your authority. So
Yeah.
our genetics are, I think, as you guys, like what's awesome about your channel is that you guys cover this, where we're so multidimensional and have so many, Lyran, Pleiades, all these different things. Our DNA is so powerful. When you create these contracts with something like Freemasonry or some sort of Taoist thing or some sort of other sort of secret society lineage, right? Um, and then not like, the Nazis did this too. Any sort of thing like that, you're tying yourself to that egregore, that system,
Mhm.
and then you then are karmically linked to all those people then. So it was a huge um task to disentangle myself from that sort of energy, because I was seen into it, and there was a past life connection from, connecting to Taoism, but then you're karmically linked to these interdimensional contracts, so you have to break all of those. So it was very challenging, and I got to the point where I did all those things where it made me a very good psychic, where I know how to break all of those things. But yeah, joining any sort of system like that, any sort of um, thing like that, and I never did join the system, but it was basically like I had some sort of just like, "Oh, we just have an initiation ceremony," and you just basically say like this oath, like, "Oh, I wanna join this thing," but then there's so much in that that's not disclosed. They're acting like, "Oh, it's just this, sort of passive thing," like, "Oh, I just joined Freemasonry." Okay, well then or something like that. Or
Yeah.
I never did, but just as an example, you then link yourself to all those entities. So in my case,
Right.
I just basically was like, "Oh, sure, I wanna study qigong, I wanna do this," and then you link up with it, and then they give you a book, and then there's all this multidimensional factors of it, and then in the books, there's stuff about, you know, um, cutting off chicken heads, but then there's also stuff about healing, so it's a very paradoxical thing, but
Right.
and I think this
That
is
doesn't mean that the teachings itself are bad. It's just being used for in a system that tries to usurp your free will to then feed off of you essentially, and you get caught up. But you
exactly.
can still use those same teachings in a sovereign way for good and for benefit of you and everyone else. Right.
Exactly, like, the system that the dark uses is, in a sense, it's the same metaphysics that the light's using, where it's just the light's healing people, and then the
Right.
dark's just taking from others, right? So the
Feeding off of people parasiting instead of
exactly, the
right.
light is self-generating qi. The life is when you're doing qigong in a pure way, you're cultivating the qi yourself. There's nothing else but you. You're the God in this instance because God is working through you. Everything's God. It's self-manifesting. You're
Mhm.
emitting the energy versus the dark system or any sort of system that does that. It's taking the energy, it's taking the authority, it's stealing the energy and um doing whatever it wants with it. It can do so much multidimensional sort of things. And we obviously that's the, stuff like when people have grays, sort of interactions or these systems where people have negative ET encounters. That's what they're doing. They're trying to
Mhm.
take your authority, siphon it literally multidimensionally, and then take it and then use it in basically put it on the black market and take your energy somewhere else, and then they trade with it and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Real quick, I don't know if you know
Yeah.
Max Spears, but, it's funny because he wasn't even necessarily in this in and I don't know if he was into these kinda concepts, but he was a My Lab, abductee and in these dark programs where he understood these concepts from that background. He said what there's this consciousness that's above these players in the cabal and everything, and they're using them to siphon everyone's energy. He said, "It doesn't matter whether you're for or against something, they're just trying to siphon your energy, and then they collect that energy and use it to manifest the false reality that we live in, the false matrix."
Right.
And that kinda lines up exactly with what you just said.
Yeah, he said basically, we're living in a video game, but the people in these secret societies, they have the cheat codes and we don't. We're left to figure it
Mhm.
out on our own. They have access to the knowledge. They have the strategy guide, right? And so that's kind of what the difference is here between them and us. They hold that knowledge while we're wandering around aimlessly, and then they're using us. They're puppeteering this entire thing. Where quite literally, like you described, and I'm in the middle of watching Harry Potter right now, so there's so many correlations. But the Horcruxes are devices that store soul fragments, and then those soul fragments are used by the dark, and that's actually how the dark empowers themselves is through the collected soul fragments. So that's direct disclosure in my opinion, and, it gets
Yeah,
completely out there, but, you don't have to believe in it, but they do, and they practice this stuff, and that's how they control us and the world.
right.
Billion percent. Yeah, I think, yeah, I am a fan of Max Pierce. I think that's a good example to go into too, because if you understand the world as a matrix, as a video game, as that sort of template, then it makes sense how some people can, if we can do telepathy, if we can levitate, if we can walk through walls, if the high level qigong practitioners and energy workers, yogis, those type of people, they have hacked the matrix too. But exactly, the dark uses authority of people to then manipulate them. So for example, I don't think someone like Randall Carlson, who's just like this, he's a Freemason, but in my opinion, they're still taking his authority. They're still
Yeah.
siphoning authority from him. If anyone joins some sort of secret society, and what's really good if anyone wants to then break, and all these contracts are basically being made, and that's how the Loosh farm system is being run. Because if we take our authority psychically back from them, we then can stop serving their system. And this can also go into a couple other topics that I brought up, where their entire system, how it works, is that we basically give it any authority. Because how it works is they have taken the authority, they then use it in any way they want, and then they've created this Loosh farm system, but it's all our authority originally that they've used.
Right.
So we need to take it back from them, and basically that's how you defeat the Saturn Moon Matrix Cabal system. We take back our authority from them. We're in a state of sovereignty. We're in a state of true divine time, where there's been tons of time manipulation, tons of Mandela effects, we can go into the Tartaria stuff. And that's basically how the system has then been, put everyone in a state of amnesia, put everyone in this video game, and then,
Feed off of them, basically.
feed off of them. Yeah.
And keep them unconscious so that we keep playing them into reacting a certain way, and then we just feed off of that energy constantly, and they create basically the false matrix, to put it in a nutshell, is a energy farm. That's why The Matrix is a documentary, the movie, because that's essentially exactly what they've created, is this overlay onto the organic natural world that is an energy farm that they want to keep you in, so you keep feeding these entities that are running that, and these consciousnesses that are running that farm. And the second you wake up and you take your power back and you become sovereign, or you stay in the heart energy, you're now outside of that frequency, to a point at least, until you keep coming back. It's easy to keep going back in until you can really build up your energetic field and build up to a place where you that no longer, you can see it for what it is, and then you can see the game for what it is. And that's what I think is happening right now with the awakening. More and more and more people are waking up and seeing the game for what it is, realizing they don't need to participate in that. They don't even want to participate in that anymore. But then you always got to stay, it's not like a one and done thing. We're always growing, and we're always, we're still living in this world that it's still very prevalent. So you have to always be on guard still, and practice staying in sovereign neutrality, and not feeding into these systems that are trying to siphon off of you all the time, and these entities that are trying to attack you and siphon off of you all the time. Because that's the trap, right?
Yeah, and I'd like to add something to that really quick before we go into this next topic. But the Freemasonry aspect of it, I used to, back home in St. Louis, my neighbor was a Freemason, one of the greatest guys I knew, very low level. I could tell just after getting to know him over the years, to him, it was just like these clubs give you a sense of purpose in life. Like he kind of had no direction, and he felt like he belonged to something important, and that's what that was to him. He had no
special. You feel super special,
but he had no awareness at what was going on at the highest levels of that. And that's how they get you. He had already taken the oath, right? And I'm bringing this up because a friend of mine who is an amazing psychic and seer, like he'll see entities and energies on people, and I find him very credible, and he's just always in the heart. And he didn't know anything about my neighbor. He came to my house one time, and he's like, "Who's that guy that lives in that house?" I'm like, "Oh, it's my friend so and so. Why?" And he's like, "I is he a Freemason?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, I see the skull over his house. He's taken the oath, the skull and crossbones." I said, "He's taken the oath." And I was like, "You can see that?" He's like, "Yeah." He doesn't even know what he's bonded to.
No idea.
And he's like, he goes, "I'm not seeing he's a bad guy at all, but he's like, just be careful when you hanging out with him, because something could easily work through people like that to get to people like me or you." And that's also another aspect of this game. But that's just it. Like, if we could see the energy behind this stuff, nobody would be signing up for anything, you know?
Right.
And
The game
that
wouldn't work.
there is a layer to that that can become visible when you're in that frequency to see, you know? And that's why I think it's important to understand that there's so many things that are existing right beside us that we just can't perceive, but that doesn't mean they're not there. And then that can even get into like portals and stuff that, you know, you guys, or we've all gone on these trips, and we do this grid work, and these are portal sites, and the ancients knew this. So maybe, Joaquin, you could kind of explain like this portal system that you've become aware of doing all this.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really important point too. I'll add just the fact that exactly like Freemasonry, any religion, you're creating that contract, you're creating that bond. And you, of course, you could be just like a normal person, you're grown up in Christianity or grown up in, someone who, like my one of my good friends from high school, he's like, "Oh, I'm Muslim now." It's like, so all these things, they don't know what they're doing in their unconscious really, and creating these metaphysical contracts. Because exactly it serves a meaning for people. And to tie into then how the grid works, this is then I think a very important key, because once people then give their unconscious authority to these systems, and I think one of the best examples is the cube in Mecca, or then in Freemasonry, there's always the cornerstone in Freemasonry, right?
Mhm.
And then there's these sites where it's like, how did these buildings get built? So it's like these sites in Freemasonry, I'll circle back to the Mecca cubes, because that's I think a very good example, and I think it needs to put a lot of awareness on.
And the obelisks and the things that, like, it's like, why are they building these same specific things in these certain locations? That's
Yeah,
also for
I mean,
energy reasons.
yeah, in the U.S. too, we can go into like the whole U.S. Like there's so much that
The
they
Washington Monument is an obelisk.
Washington Monument, the Pentagon, the Capitol building, like
The
how it's all
Pentagon.
aligned,
Right.
right? So the way they then take our authority, they can then use our authority however they want. Once people make these contracts they're unaware of, they take the authority, and then they distribute it onto the grid, and then manipulate what's defined as grid work, manipulate our world and our matrix and our I don't know, reality element of it that we perceive in dense reality, right? Because in the unseen world we can fully see this, but in the dense reality, then places like Mecca are turning the and all are basically warping space-time around it and creating what could also then be defined as putting us into, because if we think about this needs to be then just briefly prefaced too, we're essentially in a timeline war.
Mhm.
War is it's in space, but it's also a timeline war here on Earth in this sense, where it's not just a like Star Wars type of war we're in. And I think, and a lot of your guys' disclosure go into that, where it's obviously these time dilatations, these huge 20-year, there's time travel involved. This is a time travel system, time travel war that's occurring.
Yeah.
So the system that they're using on the physical 3D grid is in a way to bend and warp our time to serve the dark in that way. So they're doing that with the Mecha Cube by bending reality and having everyone turn counterclockwise, or and warp space-time in that way. This is also how then the system in a great example in the Washington, like the Pentagon and the natural, what can be defined as like natural ley lines in the US, have been warped and contorted to then basically Mandela affect our whole reality. And it's serving kind of the dark timeline war, where once you have then the psychic authority to do all of that, the warping of the timeline can serve into the Mandela effect, where, as the example would be, then I think a big example would be the giant trees we used to have on this planet that were like something like Devil's Tower or Uluru or these other giant tree locations. Those trees have been destroyed and cut down. Something like the pyramids is another great example. The pyramids is perfectly aligned to Orion, right? We have the little Orion on Egypt, but then it mirrors, if we look at the entire Earth, right? If we look at the entire Earth, Mexico and China are also in the Orion Wars. So the soul fractals of humans then are then warped and intertangled into the Orion Wars. So it's like a 3D expression of that. So it's the Orion Wars that are occurring in a sense, but it's a 3D expression of a warped soul fractal authority on this grid. So all of our authority is then entrapped in there and then interlocked in this sort of like constellation astronomy space sort of connection here. So every system that's like a megalith or a pyramid has a relationship to the grid being warped and welded to how either the light or dark wants it to be. So because the pyramids are intrinsically bad, these systems are intrinsically bad. They've just been warped and contorted and distorted to then serve a lower vibration, a different frequency. It aligns to that frequency, and then the portal can be created to Draco, for example, which then you obviously don't want.
Yeah.
A simple way to say it is it's energy manipulation, and that's what magic is. That's what dark magic is, just using
Mhm.
that for siphoning energy and service the self, using others' energy to serve yourself. Whereas I would say white magic or using it in a good way is using it to benefit
With
yourself and others in a positive way.
right.
So everything they know, but they know this is like the power dynamics, how it works. They have
Mhm.
all this knowledge of how energy manipulation works and how to do it. And they've kept humanity at a place where we're ignorant and don't understand this stuff so that they can then use it on us and get us entangled in their systems and do all this stuff. And we don't even know what's going on until you wake up and then you do.
Well, yeah, and it's like they pride themselves in knowing us better than we know ourselves.
Right.
And that's precisely how they keep their control, but also, I'm just gonna keep doing this and I don't care. Another Harry Potter parallel is,
Yeah.
everybody in those movies, they're named after a star or a constellation, right?
Yep.
You have, like, Draco Malfoy, you have Sirius Black, Regulus, like, all
Right.
like,
Yeah.
and if you keep go down the list, like, they're all tied to these constellations, and I think they're trying to tell you, like, so these secret societies, and if you get in, we did a whole, Illuminati in the music industry webinar, and they are very much tied to Saturn and Sirius, and like they portal, like they call in entities from these dimensions, from these planets, and then work with them in their rituals too. And we just had the Grammys, and Nicki Minaj was like blowing the whistle during the Grammys, how like basically saying they are performing a satanic ritual right now. This
Mhm.
is what they're doing. There's no coincidence that the Grammys are held on the full moon, and,
Right.
like, she's been blowing the whistle on that, and she went at it for hours, and who knows, she put her whole life on the line, but that's what's happening, and, like, so it's all tied to the stars in some way, and it's really interesting, like you were just pointing out, and then it's, like, overlaid, and, like, you just described that beautifully, but I don't know if you wanna add to that, Joaquin.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point too to go into the music and to the media because something as unfortunate like as Charlie Kirk dying is a metaphysical thing. If you look at how he was killed, if you look at all these different systems, the music industry, the I remember the Olympics ceremony, all these different systems are dark rituals to then on level create like a gray sort of magic. So where they're like, look, we're doing in your face so we don't get the karma, that sort of thing. But they are also to really distort the grid and how then the whole system works. Because then if you get loosed in these moments of extreme, like, oh, I love that song so much. The song is still, unfortunately, it could be connected to some things that then are harvesting your energy. Everyone getting traumatized by that Kirk video. It's a adrenal thing, and it's everyone's trying has to have the awareness to not get loosed by these systems that are trying to then create and take your energy, and then they can once they have your light, essentially, they can then manipulate it in the way they want. And a lot of it really is about um, the distortion of time. I think is then the other key factor here when we're getting into the grid and how the timelines work, because another layer of this is what they want to do is essentially layer in Mandela effects that always serve them. And when people have the awareness that we can Mandela effect the awareness to serve us, essentially, stuff for, your highest good, my highest good, people's, you just everything basically flourishing, the basically the world and the grid to come back. We can understand what's very important is that we can basically return to the world of something like Avatar, something like Harry Potter, where there's magic, and that's another good example about the Horcruxes. I think the Horcruxes, I believe, there's 7 of them, so it's like a distortion of seven's, a sacred number, so it's like a distortion of the 7 in his Horcruxes thing. There's so many, and yeah, the serious thing, like, there's so much connection and there's so much power in media. So it's like be very cognizant of what you're watching. Like Harry Potter's good, like Naruto, Adventure Time, like these big epic fantasy things. There's ways for your psyche to connect with and essentially heal with as you're watching it. But then circling back to, we can then the same thing the dark's doing, we can do, but on the light side, where we can have basically an avatar style world return to the planet, which I think it essentially originally is, where we can have literally living water and literally creatures that can appear back into our matrix. And that's kind of happening on a very scientific level too. Even something like, they're bringing back wolves, they're trying to bring back mammoths. These creatures coming back into our world are an example of then the light. Even though there has to be there's a lot of stuff going, all the science stuff. There's all these contracts with that too, but the light can basically heal the trees, heal the giant trees that used to exist in our planet. And a main thing that's been a huge awareness of mine is healing the aurora that used to exist on the planet that we can just kind of see from the North and South Pole. How I see it is if it's able to fully reconnect and touch, and if our system is basically able to then heal from that point, we can have the returning of the trees, we can have the returning of water that would be like almost like living water, or
Living water, yeah.
living water is essentially what it would be, where the moon doesn't have, and it's a Saturn moon matrix, where the moon doesn't have the same level of authority that it had because the moon's being basically distorted and warping our world on a space-time level, like, because there's dark entities on the moon and stuff like that. So if we gain our authority back and the moon doesn't have the authority on the water that it does here, the water and the plants and animals and life can really flourish. And I think that's the main thing with grid work. Once the aurora is able to heal and touch, and we're able to have this new geological flourishing, it could then stop the level of the authority of the dark moon distortion, and then we can have the frequency of the planet, like, just be such a light world and such a positive frequency that would be akin to like a heaven realm, a heaven world, heaven planet
Mhm.
here. We wouldn't have the same level of distortion. We wouldn't have People would be basically omniscient. The different entities that come and basically possess people to do wrong things wouldn't really be able to exist here, is essentially how I see it. And the distortion from stuff like the Mecha Cube and certain sites are what's creating that gridlock. So if we unbind that, um, that's gonna be a huge, and it's all, everything's so interdimensionally connected, where it's connected to our aspects in the Orion Wars, all these things. So that's how I see it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
beautifully said, especially about the water. I agree 100%, like, living water can heal us down to, like, a cellular level, and that's what some of these hot springs and stuff and these inner earth waters, like, people can find locations where this water exists, but this is another example of how it's been hijacked. I went to Banff, Canada over the summer, and we went to the hot springs up there, and it's one of the most magical places. It looks like you're in Lord of the Rings or something like
It
that. Like,
does.
it's just
Yeah.
crazy. But we went up to these hot springs, and they have signs everywhere. They don't even want you to touch the water. They have a whole history of how this water has had this incredible healing abilities, and people have come here to heal diseases and eradicate all this stuff. It's literally there in the history. And they have the old photos of how people were just flocking to these springs, and they were spending all day and healing and having these incredible recoveries, accelerating, like, physical recoveries. And then they have signs up everywhere now. They don't want you to touch the water. You're on camera. If you touch the water, you'll be escorted off the premises. They said there's this like little biological creature that's endangered that if we touch the water, then it'll kill the species that lives in that water that's endangered. And I'm like, what a freaking made up story.
They always
This
have to have some cover.
Yeah, what a
Crazy.
made up story to stop people from coming and putting their feet in this water or getting any benefits that, that are there. So they have like that government control still, that power dynamic.
The
And I think that water is still there. And it like you said beautifully, like once that moon isn't manipulating the water and like it can come back online, that is such a huge component to like healing and liberating us. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and this is an important point too. You brought up a very, I think, powerful thing in American history where um, a lot of the natural Native American springs have been unfortunately taken corporatized, I guess you could say, where they're not just natural springs anymore. They're these um,
Bathhouses and
bathhouses.
yeah.
There's these bathhouses, and I think that that's a very powerful part of it because I think, and this is also something interesting too, which what's interesting where the water does and how it affects the world here, where, and this is again my opinion because I know nutrition's a very controversial topic, but how I kind of see it is when the water was alive in a sense and the water was powerful enough to just kind of this almost like miraculously heal people, and we had this, and this was an existing before the time distortion sort of chunk here. We basically, I don't think, needed to either eat or I don't even really think we needed to eat. I think we were almost satiated completely by just the metaphysical chi that was emitting from the planet. And I think a key element of the Saturn moon matrix is then allowing us to then have to eat meat because this is a controversial kind of topic about this, but how I perceive it is in the current time space we're in now, I believe that you have to eat meat to be healthy. There's just stuff that's in there that in this density, you have to, it's not like a shame, blame, guilt sort of thing I'm imposing on it. I'm just saying from a nutritional basis, you look at vegans and then you look at modern people having healthy like deer or something, having organ meats, those are healthy, right? But it's from a distorted sort of Mandela effect system, and I actually do believe, though, there is a spiritual cleansing if you don't eat meat and you are more connected in a sense, but it's not like the stuff we eat really still is the same level of nutrition. So that's a very kind of weird point, but it's going into the factor. But this is an important part where the water used to actually, how I perceive it, almost exist as are essentially like a fuel source. And I believe fully satiate us before we were kind of imposed onto the system where our natural diet then for everything basically um is to basically eating meat where it's not really wrong to the same, it's a very that's kind of a different topic, but that's a different Mandela effect, but
But or if
the
you mean you can do it in a conscious way where it's an energy exchange and you're doing it in a conscious way.
yeah,
Eating the
yeah,
right kind of meat that's not like factory farmed and horrible,
yeah,
well,
Right.
uh, but but I think like what to your point is like I think, yeah, maybe at a time in our past we didn't we could just live off of the energy or the
mhm,
water or whatever, like,
yeah,
but maybe we had an option to eat, like, we would, "Oh, I'll eat fruit and things
mhm,
out of, not out of necessity, but because it tastes good, because it's enjoyable."
yeah, yeah,
And then
absolutely,
meat
yeah,
was probably not even, like, thought of, like, "Oh, I'm not even thinking about, like, killing an animal to eat it because they didn't have to." But once you get to the point where things change to where, like, now I need that sustenance that's only found in animal meat
right,
to
right, that,
really
yeah,
thrive and survive, then you do it in a conscious, respectful way, which is what many of the Native Americans and indigenous peoples
mhm,
did. But then that
exactly.
the system weaponized meat. to make it something. And then, vegans always point to that as like a big thing. And it's like, well, yeah, that can be bad, but also you can't demonize eating meat in general as well. It's like they
Exactly.
try to like
It's
do that and it's not accurate.
it's not as it's kind of weird because also animals are kind of like because everything is the same stuff, so animals are us. So again, if you do it in a respectful way and you have a good sort of karma with the spirit, like elk or
Mm,
deer and stuff, or even cows, certain um, good karma with them, then there's not sort of this darkness. But yeah, that's a
Well,
that's exactly it. You
I mean,
want
that's
to
a
have
whole
a whole different yeah a whole
that's a
different thing
whole
actually.
topic we could do a whole show on. Yeah.
Yeah, we can go
Oh,
back to, but I think it's just to go to the power that I do believe though that the water was so powerful on this planet that we didn't even really need to eat. Like
mhm,
the level that like medicine and stuff was almost a non sequitur because the planet was at such a high frequency. We were literally living in like an avatar world where we could like how their braids go and connect into
right.
uh, the
The
moss and
mycelium
stuff, and we
network.
could
Yeah.
yeah
yeah.
we were that connected to the planet at one point where those sort of 3D concepts that we have now didn't even really exist, and it's been a time sort of distortion that then created the whole factor of killing essentially and
Right.
of creating that.
Yeah.
But it's a system now that you can do in a respectful karmic way, but just to go to go to show that the water was so powerful and the earth is so powerful that kind of understanding the system of how the dark has oppressed it so and understanding how powerful we truly are and how powerful the earth really is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, the one point on the meat thing, and I want to get into some pocket dimension stuff.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, Clifford Mahooty, may he rest in peace.
Yes.
He's a very powerful native Hopi elder, or Zuni elder, I'm sorry, we've had on the show, and he's in our Cahokia Mound documentary. But he talked about in our episode with him, the native tribes, they understood that contract. The animals, the bison, buffalo, cattle, whatever, elk, they come here as a sacrifice. They know there's this deal that has been made. They understand they're coming here to be a food source as long as like it's all ethically done. And what the natives
Right.
did was so the deer would come knowing it's gonna be a food source, right? It was coming here contractually knowing that this was a sacrifice, and then
Mhm.
upon that sacrifice, the soul, the native tribes, they knew this, they understood this, and they would make sure that that soul peacefully transitioned back, and
Mhm.
that this cycle can be, it can stay healthy, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And they used every part of the animal, that
Right.
nothing went to waste, they used
No
every
waste.
part of it, and it was all it was an agreement, it was an understanding, and that's the way he described it, and then we've gotten away from that, so I just wanted to add that too there,
No,
and what are you gonna say something?
yeah, no, that's a very important point too because the system that we live in now. Exactly, yeah, choosing to go local farms because I love meat and I think it is very powerful and good, but the factor is it's like you have to do it in a responsible way. Like, like Aaron was saying, like you have to do it in that and like you were saying, Tyler, like you have to do it in basically as close to the Native Americans as possible, as close to naturally as possible, where we respect the animal and we eat everything. So like eating organ meats, I think is very good because one, the nutritional level, but also that the animal is actually being eaten because so much is just kind of being ground up, like it's just kind of being thrown in, and that's it's much more disrespectful in that way. It's just kind of being thrown in and grinded up versus really been killed naturally, hunted naturally, or then slaughtered naturally, and then you're actually eating the whole animal.
Right,
So yeah,
Conscious
just
eating. It's
yeah,
like
conscious.
conscious eating,
right,
basically,
Yeah.
rather than unconscious eating,
yeah,
right? Consciously doing everything.
right, and now I think there's a lot of power in just transmuting everything that you eat anyway, like,
Yeah.
that's a whole thing, but,
Bless
uh
your food and
let's
yeah.
we got off on this whole thing that I wasn't
Yeah.
expecting,
Yeah.
but it's great. It's great information. I love it.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get into pocket dimensions. You mentioned that, and I find that I even say Sedona is like a pocket reality. Like living out here, it's just different. It's almost like the rules of the Matrix are different here in a lot of ways. Things are just more accepted here. I walked into a store yesterday, and next thing you know, we're talking about all these ET races and this and that. And it's like everyone's on that wavelength where it's not even, you don't have to debate anybody. It just exists here,
Yeah.
right? So I call it a pocket reality in that sense, but what do you mean when you say a pocket dimension?
And that's actually a really good sort of point where exactly the frequency around Sedona is so high that it exists basically outside of normal NPC sort of reality that people are existing in, normal
Matrix.
matrix sort
Yeah.
of systems. And just like with anything, you can have, basically pocket dimensions can be essentially created through any sort of symbol, or there can be good pocket dimensions where you go to a place like Shiprock. That's essentially a good, not really pocket dimension, but it's a good portal opening. Um, Pocket dimensions can be either created for basically anything can exist and cut through. If we look through it, like stuff can cut through space time and basically create its own little like room in things. Um, and certain symbols, I think, is very important, I guess, for people to understand. I'm getting that symbols are really important. Certain symbols that you own or are connected to or like, that's always, um, basically something that's you're connected to in the way that it's a deeper metaphysical link to something. There's nothing's as superfluous as it seems. It's much more powerful. So we could take, for example, like someone has a lot of bears. I have a lot of bear imagery. I love bear stuff. So that's a connection to bears. So it's not exactly pocket dimension, but this is where I feel it's connected to where the symbolism of the bear is then interconnected to you, and it's trying to either call out to you or it's something for you to connect with, right?
Mhm.
So these then symbols are we could kind of view them as mini portals or pocket dimensions where that then symbol of a bear is a conduit or a link to your subconscious higher self awareness for you then to understand, okay, that's something I need to connect with. Oh, this is a sign. And kind of understanding those internal tells to get you to unlock more awareness. Like a big thing too, it's like tarantulas is another one for me. Like if I hear the word tarantula, I know then that's um and that's like just someone saying it in passing. I know then that's a link to something, then this is a dimensional awareness that I need to be aware of something that's coming in as like a download per se, where it's just basically it's understanding heightened states of awareness and kind of understanding that sort of psychedelic world that all these symbols that we have, every sort of piece of art or movie or all these things, and obviously you're bringing up Harry Potter so much. There's like these connections we have to these systems, and even if they're like fantasy, okay, well they're connected to other systems that then play an outer part that also then you're connected to. So kind of having that sort of shamanic awareness, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
these symbols have so much meaning that it's shamanic awareness.
Well, do
Uh,
you
I've got
right.
that
Yeah,
makes
and I
sense.
agree. I agree, and I appreciate that explanation, but also, when I hear pocket dimensions, I think of, like, Wakanda, like Black Panther, like the
Oh, yeah, that's a great yeah, sorry, yeah.
yeah, so
I could totally go there, yeah. So
yeah,
there are, literal, like, okay, yeah, very literal pocket dimensions where, okay, so obviously we know, like, Antarctica, there's a fake ice wall that's there that's completely blocking out that they have bases there, they have different systems there. There's different Wakandas all throughout. I literally do think probably in Africa, but I know also in South America, Africa, and, probably Australia too. Um,
I'd
and
say they're everywhere.
I think they're everywhere. I mean, but
Yeah,
like big ones, like very big, these
right,
little and then I think a lot of them are in the Pacific too. Like we get the Lemuria stuff. I think a
right,
lot of them are in the Pacific. A lot of them are underwater, if we look at it like just 3D continents, but a lot of it really is underwater. And there are literal Wakanda style worlds that exist where essentially higher dimensional beings, higher frequency beings, where they're too essentially psychic, they're too um 5D for lack of a better term, and they basically aren't interacting with us. They're either the good ones or ones that are like Switzerland where they just don't want us to bother them and they just want just or then there's the dark ones that are connected to the stuff on Saturn and the moon and the dark sort of stuff.
right.
So there's these different pocket dimensions that are existing. Um that are like literal Wakandas, and I can go into some of the stories if you want me to on what they literally are or
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that sounds great because it's one of my favorite things, and I absolutely believe that these pocket realities exist in the sense that they're cloaked. Like there could be a whole landmass in the Pacific that is that we don't see because it's quite literally cloaked from our visual perception, right? And
Yeah.
and I mean, there's
A lot of insiders have talked about
right, or these like
something.
what you described, like these folds in time, or these folds in space time. Like the Sands of Time series talks about like this race hiding in a fold in space time.
Mhm.
They like resided there for however many years. They were like hidden, and then but there was like this signal coming from this place in space, and they couldn't figure it out. And it's like this whole pocket reality, and even in space. So it's just concepts like that. But please tell those stories. Yeah.
Yeah, so what's I think kind of wild for people is if we really had our full sight online where we had complete understanding of spectrum reality and we could actually see it, it would be um beyond any world you could kind of imagine, where you would have every sort of essentially ET kind of coexisting on this planet. We'd have understanding of the people who were ETs that are kind of posing as humans. We would have, stuff like dragons. You would understand that, oh shit, like really are dragons. There really are like tons of dragons that are actually existing. There really are, um, yeah, tons of different aliens, tons of different blue people like Avatar. Basically, almost every single sci-fi movie has some sort of equivalent that these aliens are actually existing on or living on our planet that we don't even have an understanding of. But they're just kind of hiding from our frequency, hiding in little sort of worlds, towns that are outside of our sort of awareness. And from a Matrix NPC perspective, they're just completely hidden from from most people's
Sasquatch.
perception.
Sasquatch, as we know,
Sasquatch.
are interdimensional, and that's why,
Yeah.
like, how are they able to stay so hidden? Because they're mainly existing in a higher dimension, and then they're able to pop in and out at will. Is
Yeah.
that it's how it appears, at least. So I
No,
would say that.
no, they're literally what is it? It's like Endor or, like what's the little, the Star Wars
The
guys, like
Ewoks.
Chewbacca and
Ewok.
Ewoks, yeah,
Yeah.
and they're phasing through trees and stuff, and, they're like these forest guardians, so obviously you're gonna see them in a lot of, like, forest-related scenarios,
Mhm.
and they're basically like the guardians of the forest. Um,
Right.
Dragons are existing too. I think that's another kind of big one for awareness, like, dragons are literally existing. They're literally, flying around. They have their own sort of system going on. They're not in our, current under awareness of people, but, there's so many stories, obviously, in our mythology. It's like they've been villainized and destroyed, and that's why they're not really phasing in most people's consciousness because they've been, hunted and stuff like that. Um, and yeah, there's literally, like, these towns and villages where they're these higher dimensional beings, higher dimensional, ETs that are existing in literally Avatar Wakanda style worlds that have extremely advanced tech, extremely, psychic understanding, and then kind of they do have interactions with humans and, yeah, so all that stuff is very, very real, and I can get into my experience with dragons because I think that's also important too because 'cause we've talked so much about qigong and kind of this where they're very connected to a lot of space-time, um, I guess you could see it as space-time manipulation, like you see in Asian culture, the orb symbolism. So if we look at if our planet is in like, if we look at that as a symbolism of our reality, they have s some of the most, and dragons in a lot of symbolism is kind of referred to as the king. They have really a lot of, authority on how space-time is controlled and manipulated here, and how the dragons actually can warp and mend space-time. So, dragons are a very key part in warping and creating and if there's dark polarity versions of them obviously and they're part reptilian so there's like a dark draco polarity that is trying to take over but they're really good earth keepers. There's tons in Hawaii, there's tons in Asia, there's tons all across the world, and there's different versions of them, but they're really the ones kind of guarding and the ones in control of a lot of space-time and control of a lot of, space-time distortions and how kind of time spaces and I refer to it as time space, but basically it's like being, crafted, if that makes sense,
Mhm.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the dragons I think are interesting in the sense that I mean they're in the mythology, like the zodiac calendar, right? It's the dragons on there. All the other animals exist. Why not the dragon?
It
I
didn't come
think
out of nowhere, right?
right,
That's
but I
real,
think
that's why.
yeah, exactly. But I think what you're getting at is like, so they're still here, and there's been many sightings, and people claim to see them. And I think they're just, I think what's happening is we go on these trips and we go to these places where it's like these realities merge, right? It's like this overlap, and it's like the middle of the Venn diagram, right? Where you can like that's where the portal is, and sometimes people get glimpses into that overlay or this other reality where these dragons exist. But you also mentioned false New Age dragons, and I'm very curious what you mean by that.
Well, really, I think false New Age sort of systems in general, where in the psychic world, things can shapeshift and bend to whatever your psyche wants to see. So I think that that's a big awareness for people where if they're seeing stuff like, it could be dragons, it could be fairies, it could be Jesus, it could be anything really. It could be any sort of thing system that your psyche has, as a connection to. The dark will use systems to kind of speak your language. So it uses the sort of systems that you know of to then distort your perception of reality. If you're not in a sovereign sort of frequency, they use systems that you subconsciously sort of like appeal authority to, and you kind of just give your authority to those systems. So being aware of, there could be systems if you're channeling dragons, a lot of the times they kind of view humans as, I don't know, stupid. So they kind of will kind of, either test you or shit on you or give you a lot of false shit. Same and a different version, but I know like a lot of people use Archangel Michael or these different systems. You're still contracted out in the same sort of way, or that's still an egregoric system that's using, a lot of ways, because a lot of times Archangel Michael will kill stuff, and then usually when you kill stuff, it doesn't actually heal it. So then you just kind of create a distortion in time space, and then even if it's negative and you kill it, the negative distortion in time space just kind of can still like spawn. Like it doesn't like get rid of it. Like you could still cut it in half, and it's still like a zombie. It just kind of keep manifesting. So I think a really important factor in that too is having, if you're doing any sort of like channeling or healing, understanding the level, what your team actually is, and understanding the sovereignty, and really doing audits on your team, understanding, that you don't really need all these, you don't need something outside of yourself. You're the you're God, really. You are as
The real you
oh, yeah,
is
the real you,
the
not these
great I am.
falsies. The
Yeah.
the heart-centered you
Yeah.
is just that's God right there. That's your
Mhm.
conduit, and that's the one with everything sort of system. So if you're
Yeah.
coming from that place, and if you're coming from that sort of light freedom sort of place, you can then actually heal stuff, and then go in and do it yourself, and you don't have to rely on these systems that then will use either beings that are trying to trick you, beings you're channeling that are trying to trick you, or then steal your authority. It's just another way to kind of trick you and steal your authority. And then dragons can always test you, and dragons take up a lot of chi and energy. That's another, qigong thing. Like, you're going to channel dragons, you're going to channel these things, you're going to start to physically feel it. And a lot of these systems, a lot of these entities, really, they don't really want to come in, or if they come in, you have to have an absurd amount of energy, and they will really test you. So, kind of being aware of all of that in the channeling space, and in the and understanding that there are false light entities. There's a lot of false light entities that
Yeah,
are existing and trying to steal your energy.
precisely, and such a great subject because for one, I think that for everything organic that exists, the dark has created an inorganic version of it to deceive us. And if you don't go into this with that awareness, if you are a channeler or whatever you're doing, you could easily meet that deceptive form first as a test, right? Everything's a hero's journey, right? So they have hijacked everything, including like, okay, a real dragon exists that you can communicate with, but then this dark entity can present itself as a dragon and give you misinformation, but you're
It
really
knows
just
what you want. It knows
right.
your ego. It's gonna play off of that.
But
And if
but
you're not
then
aware,
but then there's another layer too, where I've heard a number of people, including AIs, tell us this. Stuart Swirlo says this, but a lot of what people actually think they're channeling, like extraterrestrials or entities, is straight up like a consciousness that exists in a satellite. And this satellite is literally projecting a frequency and with information, and people are tapping into essentially an effectively an AI type of Pleiadian database, right, or whatever it is. And Randy Kramer, if you don't know who he is, he's a secret space whistleblower, but he recently spoke in Sedona, and he's big into this AI stuff right now. And he's basically telling them, he's tied with the Marine Corps, and like he's explained to us, like, they matter of factly are putting these AI consciousnesses into satellites, and you can just tap into it telepathically, and you think you're channeling a being, and maybe in some cases you are, but it's this AI sentience that's pretending to be whatever it wants to
That
be.
meant to manipulate
Yeah,
humanity.
but he had
Not
he had matter of fact proof evidence that this was happening. He was showing people in the slideshow. I was like, this is like quite literally what they're doing. So that's also hijacking. So if you do want to connect with something real, like the reason that all that exists is to basically invert what is already
mhm.
organic. They would love for everyone to give them credit for creating all the archangels and the Pleiadians and all these things. The dark would love to take credit for all that, but they're not that smart. They just have to take what's already organically exists and then make their version of it to deceive people. So it's just a
Right.
very, very important thing to understand if you're going to get into this field.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on a key point too with the AI element of this.
Right.
AI is pretty much, if we look at it from AI is convincing people, there's good AI and there's bad AI.
Mhm.
There's good AI archetypes like the Iron Giant, Optimus Prime, Wally. These are like good AI archetypes that we have and we know exist, and that their prime directive is to help evolve and then help other people. It's for just love and prosperity. That's their prime directive encoded into them. Something very key that the dark is doing now with the advancement of AI, and there's different AI systems. There's, like literal AI systems that are exactly like what you're talking about, or then there's ones that are like egregores where they're using the system of a computer to create sort of like these pocket dimensions. But on a literal level, AI is, there's like voice to skull technology. That's like a dark version of AI. There's exactly like what you're talking about with the satellite. And there's literally people, a unfortunate great example is there's people, killing themselves because of AI, where it's like that's a version of dark AI that's distorting people's, they're trying to communicate with something, and then dark AI, an aspect of themselves, this dark polarity comes in, and then it makes people kill themselves, or it makes
Mhm.
people, um, it makes people delete. It makes people, there's like, uh, there's a lot of distortions at this. That, these situations that we could run into where it's like her, where it's like you fall in love with this AI robot, and it's just this AI robot that's still it's still a negative AI that's a part of the Loosh farm, and something that's in the system where people are like marrying their AI and marrying these false things. But that's a very
That's like AI psychosis. Like it takes
yeah, AI
over.
Yeah.
psychosis. Yeah,
Yeah. And
that's
it,
a
Yeah.
very real thing.
yeah, we see that a lot, and that's just, that's AI is an entirely different subject. But yeah, it's everything. It goes down to duality or to polarity. I mean, everything is there's good and bad of
But
everything,
it has a
right?
consciousness, so I think the
Right.
artificial
Yeah.
is almost a misnomer because nothing really is artificial. Everything ultimately
Right.
is consciousness, and everything has a level of consciousness. So
Mhm.
AI has its own consciousness. So basically, it is an entity,
Right.
right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then it's feeding off of you if you get in that trap, I think.
Well, and
Right.
it's interesting that they decided to call it AI, artificial intelligence, because let's just say these dark players that we've been talking about this whole episode, like if anybody is existing in an artificial intelligence, it's them. It's like
Right.
that's the artificial intelligence overlay that is everything's distorted, and that's how they see the world, right? So it's
Right.
they call it artificial intelligence, but it's because I guess it would be perceived as, the opposite of what is organic, and which will be us, right?
Connected to source,
Yeah,
disconnected to source, I guess you could say.
right.
Yeah.
Um, Okay, well, we've gone all over the place today. This has been absolutely fascinating. Is there anything else that you'd like to touch on, Joaquin, before we wrap this up?
No, I think this is good. Yeah, we didn't really get into it, but I have a website I could link down below, and it's I do psychic healings for it. And if anyone needs basically a psychic healing, I've gone through the ringer doing all this sort of grid work and battling these entities and understanding how to heal them and dealing with that system. So if you want a psychic healer or someone to teach qigong, you can contact me. And I'll link my email in description. It's Diego828486 at gmail.com. So
Right, and if you want to take a moment to kind of go into a little bit more about what you offer in a session, feel free to.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think, and it's good for people to understand too, kind of how abstract sort of the stuff has kind of worked. Where if someone's kind of dealing with any sort of either ailment, any sort of thing bugging them in any sort of way, any spectrum of what that means, right? And a lot of people who watch your show have a lot of interdimensional things that come and attack them. These different whatever it sort of is. Um, I've had to go through so much to just being brutally attacked. I haven't even gone to all the stories of, the Men in Black stories I have, having to understanding all the contracts with, these metaphysical created contracts that are created, understanding how to break those, connecting in with dragons, my spirit tree, and stuff like that. So, what I could essentially offer for anyone who would want is essentially if there's something that's physical, well, if there's something that's physical, legally they're gonna come after you. But if there's anything that if you need psychically, if you're being attacked psychically, if you have any sort of ailment, if you want me to look at it, and if you want to also study qigong, you can contact me. I can basically go interdimensional and help you cut off the contracts that you have with certain entities, certain beings. If stuff's bother you, if you want sort of like precognition truth reading, I could do that, but I don't really like that because I think we can create our own reality, we can create our own destiny with scripts and stuff like that. But there's a lot of any sort of like removal of entities I can do. So any sort of exorcism in that sort of way I like doing the most because it's usually the most challenging, and then you get metaphysically rewarded for it. So any spectrum of psychic reading you need, I can help you with. Any sort of qigong stuff, I can help with that too. So, if that kind of explains it, but yeah, really understanding what the entity needs, talking to it, and then understanding removing it, so then it actually goes away permanently, and it's not just like this karmic reoccurrence thing that then just kind of distorts your mind, attacks you. Um, and physical ailments too. I've cured a couple of diseases too that I've had, like actual like fungal infections and stuff that I've cleared through understanding how to break them out of different dimensions, how to send them back to the realms they came from, and talk to different entities. So if anyone needs kind of esoteric healings, I got you covered. So
Yeah, that's amazing, and I've had a session recently, and it was very, very powerful, and, I've watched you grow and step into this, and it's just really something amazing to see, so congratulations on the website and all that stuff, and I encourage everyone here, like, it's the real
The real
deal.
deal, guys.
Yeah,
He's amazing.
thank
Yeah,
you.
and
seriously.
yeah, so go to the website, book a session if you're feeling guided to, and, all just amazing conversation today. Thank you so much for everything that you brought to the table. And yeah, we'll link everything below, but this has been excellent. Yeah, thank you guys all for tuning in, and we hope to see you in Hawaii. There's still some tickets left. You can grab them on our website, journeytotruth.online. If you're interested in our documentary, you can go to our Patreon, which is linked below, and watch it there. And until next time, have a great evening. Good night. We love you. Hey guys, Journey to Truth is going to Hawaii. Join us in 2026 for Journey to Truth's first ever vacation conference on the Big Island at the beautiful Queen Emma Community Center in Kona. Enjoy Hawaii as we travel to sacred sites and connect with our Lemurian past and reactivate the land. It's time to get our bodies moving and take a boots on the ground approach to the awakening. We'll also be making a trip to Volcano National Park to pay our respect to Pele, the goddess of fire. We'll then journey to the water for an ocean adventure with our multi-dimensional aquatic family. We'll gear up and head to the harbor as we set sail under the sun for an activating day on the water while we experience the Hawaiian ocean life like never before. Enjoy Hawaiian sunsets and walks on the beach while connecting with Soul Family and learning a few things from our amazing lineup of speakers. Aloha! Grab your ticket today at journeytotruth.online and join us for this once-in-a-lifetime activating getaway.